So whilst I'm anti-diet, I am not anti-intermittent fasting. Let me explain why I think it's different. Although it's often grouped together as diets and intermittent fasting because it's seen as a way of starving yourself, that isn't my perspective of it. So let me share with you why I think intermittent fasting is not a diet. First of all, we fast every single night. So all of us already fast. When we go to sleep, having had supper, until we wake up and have breakfast, we are in a fasted state. So it is already something that you are doing. We also evolved with having times where food was less accessible. We didn't have refrigerators, we didn't have supermarkets, we didn't have the 24/7 easy access to food that most of us are lucky enough to now have access to. So our bodies evolved with being able to forego some time without food, and actually that benefited us. So what happens when we don't eat food is that our body breaks down stored energy, which sometimes is in the form of glycogen and sometimes is in the form of fat. That stored energy is your body doing you an incredible favor. Your body has stored that energy for the inevitable time when food is scarce, which it believes it will be because that's how we evolved. Eating 24/7 isn't natural to us. It might be delicious, but it's not how our bodies perform best. So, of course, if you're practicing intermittent fasting and you're looking at your watch and you're like so hungry, but you're like, I can't eat for another hour, that isn't working with your body. Like, that's not what I'm promoting. But if you wake up and you don't feel hungry and you're happy to have a glass of water and maybe a black coffee and go for another hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours until your appetite starts to rev up, you are then working in harmony with your body. So for me, intermittent fasting is not dieting, but of course, it all depends on the mindset in which you approach your intermittent fasting. And I very much advocate for you to listen to your body, to use intermittent fasting alongside listening to your body cues. So that might mean surfing some hunger. That might mean like, okay, you're experiencing some gentle hunger. Like, can you sit with that for a moment? Like, maybe you don't need to eat straight away. Maybe you need to eat in 30 minutes. And that, that's perfect. That's listening to your body. That's listening to your hunger cues. I'm not ever suggesting that someone is like really hungry and really, fighting against it because they're watching the time and like waiting until it's the time that they can break their fast. So if you wanted to start practicing intermittent fasting, here are my 2 tips for complete beginners. First of all, start to just be more mindful of what you're eating. So more whole foods, less packaged foods. You know what those look like. It's not because those are like eating those foods it's not because you're a bad person if you eat those foods. It's that those foods, those packaged foods, they are not serving your body in the same way that eating whole foods are. And by whole foods, I mean anything that comes from nature. Yogurt, dairy, butter, avocado, nuts, meat if you eat meat, fish if you eat fish, tofu if you're plant-based, legumes, nuts and seeds, fruits, all the vegetables. Like, yes, of course, sometimes we're also going to have some processed foods, but let's keep that in the smaller side of the spectrum. So building your food, your plate around whole foods. Focus on the 80%, don't worry about the 20%, but 80% of the time be aiming to eat proper, real whole foods that are going to fill your body with everything that it needs. So that's my first tip. Like, don't just start intermittent fasting if you're eating a lot of refined carbohydrates because it's going to be hard. You need to have the protein, the fat, the complex carbohydrates in there to support you during fasting. And then the second thing to do is just to slowly eke out the length of time that you are already naturally fasting. So you're already fasting from, say, 9 o'clock at night until 8 o'clock in the morning. See if you can start to slowly eke that out. So that might mean that instead of having like that piece of chocolate at 9 o'clock that you don't really need, but you're just kind of having it out of habit. Maybe that's the time that you watch a little bit of TV or something and you have that piece of chocolate, but it's not because you're hungry, you don't really need it. Like maybe you have that piece of chocolate straight after your supper at 7 o'clock. Now you've already gained a couple of hours where you can give your body time without having to digest any kind of food, without having to, break down the food that you've eaten. And then in the morning, see if you can begin to just slowly increase, maybe just a half an hour at a time, increase the amount of time that you wait until you break your fast. That's literally what breakfast means, break fast, breaking your fast. Now, there are a couple of things that I want you to be really aware of. If you are fasting as a woman, it's really important that you fast in alignment with your cycle. And so what I recommend is not to fast, longer than 12, 13 hours the week leading up to your period. And that's really important that you're protecting your hormones because, we don't want to mess around with those. So I do have a free downloadable PDF, which gives all of my first beginner tips on how to start intermittent fasting, how to incorporate intermittent fasting into your lifestyle whilst listening to your body, whilst respecting your body. So key, so important, and why I don't believe that intermittent fasting is dieting. So yeah, if you've got any questions, let me know. If you want that PDF, just put intermittent fasting in the comments or DM me and I can send it to you. And if you've got any thoughts about intermittent fasting, if you've tried it and it's worked for you, I'd love to hear. If you've tried it and it hasn't worked for you, I'd love to hear. I'm a massive fan of intermittent fasting and I am also totally anti-diets. So I definitely believe that it can be done in a really beautiful way where you're listening to your body.